Good morning, this is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Miss V Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. PsychicTarot.ca, book your tarot reading and unlock your spiritual journey. And the Pepper Master, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind.
Well, good morning. It's New Year's Eve. We're gonna get down with our bad selves here at Old Beaver Lodge. Good morning, damn fam, and welcome to Season 5 and episode number 822 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. Oh, Canada. Today, recording day is Wednesday, January 31st, 2025, the very, very last day of this year, and we are going to finish it off in style, folks. Hopefully. I am your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver A, and not with me, as usual, is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. Big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Pepper Master, the Miss V Mysteries from Corbin Moon Publishing, and PsychicTarot.ca. Don't know what kind of day it is at the Beaver Lodge because I actually didn't look outside the window today. I just came directly to the studios. It could be whatever it is today. But hey, for those of us for whom this was a good year, obviously probably a little extra cheer. And for those of us for whom it wasn't as good, probably celebrating with relief the fact that it will soon be in the rearview mirror. All right, let me put this down on the floor, however, because we're learning our lessons, right? And I'm back. All right. I've got poofy hair today for some reason, which is kind of weird because it's freshly washed. But yeah, maybe because it's a little dry in here, got all little poofy. But hey, that's okay. That's okay. We can fix that in post. Yeah. Oh man, kids and cubs, how is your mental health doing today? For some reason, I think I must have missed something in the intro, but I don't know. But we'll just keep moving. It seems like it was rather short today. I am doing much better. Had a lovely day yesterday. Of course, it started off with time with you. But after the show was finished, we made some oatmeal and for breakfast. And or actually late lunch or late breakfast, early lunch. And we were to go sledding and then hang out at my Beaver Sweeties families to play some board games and stuff. And because the night before, as you all know, I only had 4 hours sleep by the time 2:15 came along and we had a belly full of oatmeal, I started to fade real quickly. I was sitting at the table finishing my oatmeal. It's amazing that I didn't just drown face down in the bowl. So instead of going sledding, we took a nap. And then went out to Alex's family and got there about 2 hours later than we had originally planned, because I, when I say nap, I'm not talking 20 or 30 minutes. I needed like an hour and a half to do. But it did give me the boost of energy I needed to get through the whole day. Of course, when my biological clock is now completely thrown off, which, you know, not so great for waking up early in the morning, but given that today is New Year's Beav, and we will probably be up later tonight celebrating, I'm hoping that the shift in my schedule will mean that I will actually be awake to ring in midnight tonight. Because last year it didn't happen. I think I was in. We were getting close to midnight, and I think it's like I made it till about 11:15. So sorry, guys, I need to tap out. This beef is tired. So, and of course, we're going to be driving off to Barrie later today to celebrate with a lot of Alex's friends from the time he grew up. There's a whole lot of community of Romanian friends in the area, and they've all kept in touch all these years, and we see each other frequently for events, get-togethers at a pub or darts night or a Canada Day barbecue or something like that. So they're a wonderful, extremely welcoming, extremely kind group of people right from the very, very first time I met them all as a group. They just accepted me right away, and it's there are certain parties you go to that sometimes feel like obligations or whatnot. This does not. This is going to be just absolutely wonderful. A big old loving with beautiful, beautiful people. I I can't think of a better way to ring in the new year. So yeah, we are going to have a wonderful time. Hopefully, on the way there in the car, I'll be able to grab a little snooze. But that will depend a little bit on weather, because in that area, we've been having some weather the last little while, and the snow squalls in that area have been rather substantive and impressive from what we can tell from Environment Canada and all that kind of stuff. So we are going to take our time, drive cautiously, and if needed, and we'll be staying there tonight. For tomorrow's show, get some comes in terms of a programming note. I don't know exactly how it's going to go down. I'm going to talk to Mr. Grizzly during the day at some point to see at what time he wants to do something. If he wants to do it at the regular 7 a.m. Or later. If he wants to do it at the regular 7 a.m., I'm probably going to have to tap out on that one, because I have a feeling we might be up rather late. Let's put it this way: this group can party, so so I might be up a little later, and I don't know how many people are staying over, and I don't know where everybody's sleeping, so I'm not sure whether or not tomorrow morning there will be a place anywhere in the house that I could go to quietly and make a show happen. I'm pretty sure that we will have the internet connections required, because our friends who live there are very much need to work remotely, and have jobs where they have lots of online meetings and whatnot, so they would need a fairly good connection. So that part I'm not worried about. I'm just worried about there being a place I can do a show that we can house up. Let's put it that way. So it's a mystery. So please just keep track of our socials, and we will be able to indicate more. I will try to program the show the night before on our YouTube channel, so that the start time will appear there, so you should be able to see it and have an idea. But right now, completely honest, everything's sort of up in the air for tomorrow, because I'm going to be in a new place I've never been before, and not exactly sure what all the logistics and stuff will be. But there will be something tomorrow at some point. I know that for sure, because I'm not going to totally miss my damn time tomorrow. I just have no idea how it's going to go down. So just wanted to put that out there at the beginning of the show because, and I'm sure there might be some people who watch the show who might appreciate a later start, particularly tomorrow, which means that you are free to party down and get down with your bad selves, and your Royale with Cheese Queen Beaver will completely approve of all the ways that you are going to choose to get down and boogie. So long as you remember, don't drink and drive, make your plans, find your designated driver, Operation Red Nose, cab, all that kind of stuff. But remember, the most important part about New Year's Eve celebrations is to arrive to and from alive. All right? So have fun. Do not have any moderation with your fun. But if you are drinking and you need to get home, a little moderation or some pre-planning will make sure that everybody gets to wake up tomorrow with very, very, very happy New Year's Eve memories. All right, let's dive in to the final show of the year. And let's see who is here today on the chat with us. I see Kit Saucy, and I see Kit Linda, and I see Kit Nona Carol, and I see Kit Elaine. Who else is here? Argosy Acres is with us today. Oh, and hey, if somebody's gonna end the year by saying that I look handsome today, I am definitely gonna take that compliment. Thank you so much. Wow, y'all know how to make a beaver feel special, kids and cubs. I will say that. Who else do we have? We have Kit Grace. Hey, hi. Well, yeah. If 2025 sucked for you, here's hoping that 2026 starts off as a bright, fresh new year with no mistakes in it, and remains that way for more than the first 15 minutes of the day. We have Kit Hyper T here. Yeah, the acoustics are not great in this room. I admit I listened to the show yesterday and was like, ooh, darker light and not the best acoustics. As we say in French, on fait ce qu'on peut. We do what we can with what we have. I could do the show somewhere else in the apartment just on the cell phone, but then I wouldn't have access to the actual desktop computer to have the articles to be able to do that and show clips. So it's kind of a trade-off, a little bit of sound quality and image quality for the ability to do a more fulsome show in the way that I'm more accustomed to. Let's put it that way. So I chose the trade-off. But you're absolutely right. The acoustics here, not the best, especially since Mr. Grizzly loves good sound quality and prides himself on it. Today, he would probably disavow. Also, for some reason, on this computer, the camera is underneath the screen rather than on top, which is kind of weird. So I'm like trying to look down so that I can maintain eye contact. But anytime I'm looking at something normally, well, now it looks like I'm looking up if I'm looking at my screen, which is kind of weird. And I just noticed when I'm looking up that you can see everything up my nose. We share a lot. We share maybe a little too much. All right, who else is here with us? Okay, we have Kit PNC Bio over here, and we have Kit Uncover with us. I hope that you're feeling a little better. I know that you were under the weather yesterday. Let's see. Oh, Kit Argosy Acres says buried 10 to 30 centimeters of snow today. Okay, so we will be careful and cautious when we are driving. Thank you for giving me that update there. The Owen Sound area, 30 to 70 centimeters of snow. Ooh, okay, that's a lot. We have Kit playing with 3D with us, and Kit Cassie, hey, how are you? Please give my best to the cowboy, and a big hugs to both of you for the new year. Who else do we have with us? Kit Dawna, hey, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us today. And we have, let's see, Kit Lori is with us, saying, I think this will be another quiet New Year's Eve celebration. No complaints whatsoever. However it is, you choose to celebrate, and sometimes that can be just having a nice quiet night to yourself. I hope it is a night that brings you contentment and fulfillment. Kid PNC bio, full of energy and sloppy drunk is a weird combo. Yeah, agreed. I have a feeling there might have been some context behind that that I missed, but there you go. And that's how I have everyone today on the chat. If I missed anyone, I'm sorry. And but I am glad that you are here. And okay, Kit Cassie, full clinic shift today. Respiratory flu going around like the plague. Yeah, indeed. It's a pretty um, bad season for it this year, especially since what was what's in the flu shot this year is not necessarily coordinating with the strain that we are having. So it's still important to get the flu shot because there are more than one strain, and for the other strains it is still good. But yes, there's a lot of people coming down with it really bad. The one that I had this year, and again, still a little congested from it, even though we're not talking about well over a week now. But yeah, this one I had is probably the second worst flu I've ever had. There was one that I had a few years ago, I think at Kids and Cubs, if you remember, because I think we were still doing the show. We had already started doing the show then. But there was one flu I had a few years ago where I was just so feverish and whatnot. I couldn't get out of bed, and I was alone at the Ottawa Beaver Lodge. And I think I had stayed in bed in 2 days and hadn't eaten anything. And when I woke up at the end of the second morning, I tried to get up a little bit, and I really couldn't. And the thought hit me, it's like, oh, this is how people end up dying of the flu, is that they stay in bed and they stay in bed and they stay in bed, and then they don't eat, and at some point they really need to eat, but they are so weak that they can't even stand up long enough to warm up some broth. I remember that morning, it's like something around 9 o'clock in the morning. I thought, ooh, I might need some help. I might need to call someone. I thought that at 9:30. By about 10:15, I managed to cross the width of the condo and pick up the handheld and bring it back to bed. And then I fell asleep again. And then I think around noon or something, I thought maybe I should use that handheld to call someone. And think finally got around to it, something like 2 or something. So yeah, from first thought, hey, maybe I should call someone, to the time I actually had enough energy to do it, 5 hours. So that was a pretty bad flu. And then, of course, when my neighbors one floor down, who were able to bring some stuff to me, actually knocked on the door, that's when I realized, oh crap, I have to make it across the whole condo again to open the door. This is not going to be easy. So, yeah, sometimes a flu can really, really, really kick your butt. But this one, even though it was bad, nowhere near as bad as that one. I only spent one full day in bed, and even though I didn't eat much, and I haven't had much appetite actually since, believe it or not, which is kind of interesting. I weighed myself this morning, and I think this might be the first holiday season in about a decade in which I've actually lost weight. And because we eat a lot, and there's lots of desserts and candies and lots of sweets and stuff, and maybe a slightly higher frequency of potent potables than usual. And, there are sugars in that and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I've been actually losing weight. I haven't been feeling hungry or all of that kind of stuff, but yeah, just not not overindulging as I tend to do at this time of year. So you know what? It's going to be great for gearing up for the tennis season, and making sure that I'm a little closer to my bikini body weight for my time on the beach in Mexico next month, because it is all about looking good on the beach. I really stopped caring about that a while ago. I'm just there for the sound of the waves, honey. I'm just there for the sound of the waves. All right. And the yummy, tasty drinks and the ceviche and the guac and chips. I'm there. Sign me up for it, man. I'm gonna be. Trust me. When I go to Mexico, unless we're very active, walking around stuff and doing a lot of swimming and snorkeling. Uh, uh, One of the reasons I love going to Mexico is because everything there is corn. I get to eat like a king. So the Christmas overindulgence may happen in February this year. That said, when I'm in Mexico, just the way the cooking happens down there. Even though I tend to eat more, I tend to eat healthier. It seems, and not that I don't eat healthy regularly, but just I love pico and can't get enough of it. Avocado, guac, ceviche, fresh fish, all that kind of stuff. Simple cooking. So I tend to just naturally, based on the selections that are there before me, which tend to be healthier, less prepared, pre-prepared food, and all that kind of stuff. End up eating healthier, which is kind of odd on vacation. But so I'm very much looking forward to it. All right, let's get into the subjects of the day because we do have a lot to cover. The first thing I want to talk about is that okay, yeah, okay, I just saw a comment in the chat that caught my eye there. There's been a lot of news over the past little while for Canada's Indigenous community, and the first part of it is some good news for them because this is something that they have been seeking for quite a while. But it would seem that, as you know, a couple of years ago, the three distinct groups, the First Nations, the Inuit, and the Métis, all went to the Vatican to speak to the Pope, and that led to the Pope coming onto Canadian soil to deliver a formal apology for the horror that was residential schools. But also, parallel to that, there was a move, and this move has been on for a long time, to try to reclaim artifacts that were taken from this land and brought over to Europe, to the Vatican, all those years ago, when we were making decisions, that when we look back at them with 2025 eyes, were probably not the best decisions, not particularly respectful. But there's been a development. Now, this is news that took place a little while ago, but we just never got around to reporting. And I wanted to mention it today because we have another story related to Indigenous people, and I wanted to put them together. And this is a good news story, so end of the season, why not? So according to Megan Williams of CBC News, this was posted November 15th, so we are late to this. A century-old Inuvialut kayak once used for beluga and whale hunts and 61 other cultural objects from First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities have long been held in Vatican Museum vaults. But the cultural items will be returned to Canada on December 6th after Pope Leo XIV gifted them to the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops on Saturday, said a joint statement by the Vatican and the conference. The announcement was made following a meeting at the Holy See between the Pope and a CCCB delegation, including its president, Bishop Pierre Boudreau. Oops, that was my alarm there. So let's start that sentence again. The announcement was made following a meeting at Holy See between the Pope and a CCCB delegation, including its president, Bishop Pierre Boudreau, Reverend Richard Smith, Archbishop of Vancouver, and Reverend Jean Vézina, General Secretary. Vézina. That's a name that is in our family tree, actually. So I always get a little happy when I see a Vézina for some reason. It just gives me a little jolt of happy. Quote, at the conclusion of the journey initiated by Pope Francis that included his apostolic journey to Canada in 2022, various audiences with Indigenous communities, and the publication of the Declaration of the Doctrine of Discovery in 2023, His Holiness Pope Leo XIV desires that this gift represent a concrete sign of dialogue, respect, and fraternity, the statement said. It also said the Pope has given the objects to the CCCB, who, quote, are committed to ensuring that these artifacts are properly safeguarded, respected, and preserved. The CCCB will proceed as soon as possible to transfer these artifacts to the National Indigenous Organizations, or NIOs. The NIOs will then ensure that the artifacts are reunited with their communities of origin, the Canadian bishop said. The negotiations were led by Indigenous groups and had been going on for 2 years. The expense of the negotiations and the return of the cultural objects to date have been prepaid by Indigenous groups. I find this interesting that the Vatican is not releasing the articles directly to the community, but to the Conference of Catholic Bishops, and then it is up to the Conference of the Catholic Bishops, because they are the bishops that were on this territory who took the artifacts, up to them to return them. So it's a two-step process, but the symbolism of it is kind of interesting, that the people that were the groups that were on the ground here took them are the groups that will be physically returning them. The only thing that I'm interested that I find curious about this is that the return of the objects are prepaid by Indigenous groups. I'm not understanding why the return of those objects weren't paid for by the church or the CCCB, given that they're the ones who took them. If you took them, the cost to return them should be yours, not theirs. That one's a little bit of a head scratcher for me. Sorry, that was something just slipped and I made that noise. I apologize for that. Joyce Napier is Canadian ambassador to the Holy See. Joyce Napier is Canadian ambassador to the Holy See, and she was part of the Canadian government efforts to help repatriate the cultural items. I'm sorry, that sounded a little clunky. There was a word missing in that sentence and I had to fill it in. Calling the return of the items, quote, a historic day, Napier added, there have been many conversations with the Vatican and CCCB, and it was clear the Vatican wished to return the objects, with Pope Francis's illness and death temporarily slowing the negotiations, she added. Napier said the items now in vaults inside the Vatican museums will be packaged in crates and flown to Montreal via Frankfurt on Air Canada flight set to arrive on December 6th. From there, they will be shipped to the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau, Quebec, where experts will assess their condition, confirm their origins, and work with Indigenous representatives to decide where they should ultimately end up. And later on in the show, we'll be presenting a little bit of an interview with Prime Minister Mark Carney that was done by Dawna Friesen of Global TV. And in the intro, they did the interview at the Canadian Museum of History, and in the intro, they mentioned there that the artifacts had just been returned. After years of calls for repatriation, the move is being seen as a significant step for Indigenous communities, where for decades children were taken from their families and forced to attend Catholic Church-run residential schools where abuse was rampant. Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand also welcomed the move. Quote, this is an important step that honors the diverse cultural heritage of Indigenous peoples and supports ongoing efforts towards truth, justice, and reconciliation, Anand wrote on X, formerly Twitter. The one issue that I have with this article is I really would have loved for the very, very, very first quote about this to belong to someone within the Indigenous community. The return of the items is structured as a church-to-church gift, which Vatican spokesperson Matteo Bruni said is how the Vatican gives back cultural objects, allowing it to avoid setting a precedent of returning items directly to nations or communities. In 2023, a year after Pope Francis's penitential trip to Canada, when he apologized for some members of the Catholic Church's role in residential schools, Francis acknowledged the importance of restitution of items, many considered sacred by some First Nations. During meetings in Italy, Canada's Prime Minister at the time, Justin Trudeau, and later Foreign Minister Mélanie Joly pressed the Pope and the Vatican's Secretary of State to return the cultural objects. The kayak was among 100,000 objects originally sent to Rome in 1925 for a world exhibition organized by Pope Pius XI, who invited Catholic missionaries to ship, quote, examples of Indigenous life from the regions where the men worked. Other notable items included a wampum belt from Gananoque, Quebec, that was donated to Pope Gregory XVI in 1831, embroidered leather gloves of Cree origin, and a Gwich'in baby belt. Many of the objects came from Indigenous communities during a period of forced conversion, cultural suppression, and residential school system in Canada, and most were made inside Vatican Museum's storage rooms. Indigenous leaders stressed that ceremonies must take place before the items make the journey home. Some have criticized the church-to-church approach and insisted communities be directly involved in identifying the items. I would have thought that that would have been a basic step in there, but apparently it wasn't. I saw an interview, I think, Victoria Purdom, who is the new president of the Métis National Council, and while she celebrated the return of the items, it seems that only one of the items that have been returned were of significance specifically to the Métis community. So let's just say that the distribution of the items that were there among the three particular groups was not all that even. She is hoping that there will be more items released in the future, and that there will be more that will be relevant to the Métis community. But that is one of the key points of this return, that sometimes didn't go as reported as it should be. There are a couple of images here of the items that I'm going to share on screen, because since we're talking about these things, we might as well be able to take a look at them. So this here is the Inuvialut kayak that we talked about at the beginning of the article. And if we scroll down more here, this is another one of the artifacts here. If we keep going down a little bit more, these are thread embroidered gloves attributed to the Cree from Canada's Central Subarctic on display at the Vatican Museums. And then we have, those are the items that were in the article there for you. So that's a good piece of news, and hopefully items will continue to return. The other piece of news that came along, and Mr. Grizzly talked about it a little bit on his Grizzly Growl, but it seems that there had been the whole issue of taking care of Indigenous children in the child welfare system. Indigenous communities want to reclaim that, and the responsibility and the role for doing this, and we're looking for some compensation, not only to be able to do that, but of course for past torts that had been committed during that time. According to Catherine Morrison of the Canadian Press, it seems that both Ottawa and First Nations are presenting competing plans to reform the child welfare system. So according to this, and this was about a week ago, it says here, Ottawa and First Nations faced a deadline Monday to present the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal with their respective plans to reform the First Nations child welfare system, the latest step in a lengthy fight that has stretched nearly 20 years. And Mr. Grizzly really made a good point when he was talking about that. But this fight started so long ago, and at that point, it was very pressing. And like 20 years, we usually look at 20 years as a generation. There's literally been a whole generation of children. Because even though we've started to acknowledge 20 years ago that we needed to fix this, that did not get help. And what the proper due was. Because for some reason, even though we acknowledged 20 years ago that we need to do this, we just can't seem to get around to doing it the right way. Yeah, that's frustrating. The August Tribunal ordered that mandated the proposals came 9 years after it concluded the federal government had discriminated against First Nations children by underfunding the on-reserve child welfare system. So the decision came. And that was like 9 years. Wow. Okay. So they found out there was a finding of discrimination, and instead of acting on it right away, First Nations had to go to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal and get another order that we needed to do right by the kids, because apparently the first time wasn't enough. That followed a joint 2007 human rights complaint filed by the Assembly of First Nations and the First Nation Child and Family Caring Society. That's a society that is led, of course, by Cindy Blackstock, who we keep on trying to have on the show, but every time we communicate with her, there seems to be a new development, and then her attention has to go there, of course. So hopefully we will get her one day. Progress on a child welfare agreement to reform the system stalled last year when First Nations twice rejected a $47.8 billion deal they said did not go far enough to protect kids. I'm not sure if there's more in the article. I guess that's about one. There it is. Continue reading. The tribunal said in August that Ottawa cannot simply wait and let time go by instead of renegotiating a deal with First Nations. It said that if Ottawa refused to resume negotiations, the Assembly of First Nations, the Caring Society, and the National Children's Chiefs Commission could present the tribunal with an evidence-based reform plan of their own. Prime Minister Mark Carney said during the spring federal election campaign he would work with First Nations to reform the system, adding it is critical to ensuring Indigenous children are set up for success. Indigenous Services Minister Mandy Gulmasti said Monday she spent most of the time analyzing why the last agreement was rejected, adding that the government decided to take a national approach based on regional agreements. Gulmasti said in an interview the government is introducing new components, including flexibility that would allow regions to determine for themselves where to invest in things like prevention programming or information technology. Quote, "For me, I think the component that is shifting is really to empower First Nation communities to be decision makers for the region," Gulmasti said. "You're not only protecting these children in the most vulnerable time of their life, you're also protecting who they are as First Nations." The government said in a media release its plan includes $35.5 billion in funding to 2033-34, followed by an ongoing commitment of $4.4 billion annually. So it's less than the initial offer, but the time period that it covers is also shorter. So it's not like they are giving that less amount for the same time period, or that they're trying to undercut. That period is shorter. And then I guess the time after the time at which we arrive at the point where there's an annual ongoing commitment would arrive earlier than under the previous plan, even if that was a part of the previous plan. Because I'm not certain that is the case. Gulmasti said she contacted the First Nations organizations leading up to the deadline and made an offer to release a joint statement. "I wish we would have had the opportunity to work together. We are all accountable to do the work and ensure that we are responding to the needs of First Nations children," Gulmasti said. "The longer this process takes, it's another day that a child is in a care system that's not developed to protect their best interests," said the federal government 20 years later. The new government news release said discussions with interested regional First Nations entities will begin early in the new year. Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepinack expressed support in principle in a news released Monday for the plan submitted by the National Children's Chiefs Commission and the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society. Quote, "Nothing is more important than our children," Woodhouse-Nepinack said, "and we want the government to place the same priority on First Nations children as we do. Today is the last step in a too long drawn-out process." And this is very, the weight of that quote, when you hear her say nothing is more important than our children, you have to appreciate the weight of that quote, because in Indigenous culture, children are considered to be gifts from the Creator, and therefore, right when we're not doing right by children, it is particularly and especially hurtful. The Assembly's news release said the submission supports a region-by-region approach to long-term reform alongside a national plan. Woodhouse-Nepinack said the AFN will review the plans from the groups and the government and hopes there are strong commonalities because the preference is to work collaboratively with Ottawa. Quote, "But make no mistake, we will continue to fight for our children if we have to." So we have that, and then we have the federal government's offer itself that came out, and it says here, this is from CBC, Prime Minister Mark Carney's government is presenting a new plan worth more than $35.5 billion to keep First Nations children connected to their communities, culture, and families. The offer is less than the $47.8 billion presented by former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government over 10 years, but it covers a shorter period of time and contains a key difference, a $4.4 annual commitment starting in 2033-34, after the initial $35.5 billion was spent. So I'm getting the sense from this that that's exactly what it was. So this is, the Trudeau government was over 10 years. So let's say it would start right away in 2026. It would go to 2036. This deal here ends in 2033-34 instead of 36-37. So it has $12.3 billion less, but it seems that the $4.4 billion annual commitment that would start was something that was not part of the initial plan. So the initial plan would have been a one-time payment of $47.8 billion. And I guess you go and you establish the system that you want and invest that money wisely so that there can be some returns on that that you can use to keep funding the program, but there would be no ongoing annual commitment. Indigenous Services Minister Mandy Golmasti shared the details with CBC News before making the announcement in Ottawa on Monday, the day her government's plan to reform the on-reserve child welfare system is due to be resubmitted at the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. Quote, every day that we continue to try to define what an agreement looks like, or trying to determine through legal measures how you're going to stop discrimination, is another day that a child is in care, Golmasti said. If we're really going to address that, it has to be in creating a system where a child is in care surrounded by their community, by those they know, by those that love them, by those that are going to teach them their culture, their identity, and their language. But the government's plan isn't the only one the tribunal is considering. A group of First Nations chiefs and children advocates known as the National Children's Chiefs Commission is filing a competing proposal with the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society. Quote, at the center of our plan is our love for our kids, said Cindy Blackstock, Executive Director of the Canadian Society. The commission was directed by the Assembly of First Nations to develop a First Nations-led plan after chiefs rejected the $47.8 billion offer from the Trudeau government last year over concerns the money was only earmarked for 10 years and would be subject to annual reviews. Ooh, that is not good, because if you have a change of government, let's say, that would have been in place, and you have the Poilièvre government come in, and the Poilièvre government who's very anti-Indigenous, except in cases where they agree to having an oil pipeline pass on their territory. There probably would have been systematic efforts to pare that back afterwards during those reviews. The submissions are being made nearly a decade after the tribunal issued a landmark ruling that found Ottawa racially discriminated against First Nations children by underfunding First Nations Child and Family Services and ordered an end to the discrimination. The proposals also come almost 20 years following a joint human rights complaint made by the AFN and the Caring Society in 2007. If the tribunal approves Ottawa's plan, Golmasti said the more than $35.5 billion in funding will be secured in a legal order to ensure it's protected from future changes in government and will be made available right away. Yes, yes, yes. She said the government has not taken away the $47.8 billion previously on the table because it has been drawing from those funds to pay for services at a cost of approximately $4.4 billion per year. The government is pitching a national reform plan, but looking to strike regional agreements with First Nations entities so they can tailor the delivery and funding of services to their distinct realities, Golmasti said. So in that previous paragraph, if I'm understanding it correctly, also another reason that the amount is lower is that while they're waiting to get to this agreement, I'm guessing that there has been a $4.4 billion per year disbursement, is what I'm understanding from this article. But don't take that to the bank as a fact, because that's just me using deduction by what's stated here. I'm not, the way that sentence was written, I'm not sure if that's explicitly what it means. I would need someone from the community to confirm that that is indeed the case, but it seems that that's what happened here. Under the proposal, she said communities will determine their standard of care. Quote, I believe the community needs to drive the decision-making, needs to drive what they're going to establish in their First Nation because it is defined according to their identity, Golmasti said. Blackstock said she would rather see national minimum standards applied to First Nations child and family services with regional variations, so the federal government is held accountable to the same level. Oh my God, there's a word missing in that sentence again. Hold on, let me see if I can try to complete that to make it make sense. Blackstock said she would rather see national minimum standards applied to First Nations child and family services with regional variations, so the federal government is held accountable to... I have no idea what that sentence is supposed to say. Maintaining the same level of care across the country. Quote, Canada systematically discriminated against every First Nations child across the country, so we need systemic solutions to hold it to account, to make sure it stops and it doesn't happen again, Blackstock said. That can't happen on a community-by-community approach. So far, 7 regions have expressed interest in pursuing regional deals with the government, according to Golmasti. She said she hopes to have all regional agreements in place by September 2026 and implemented by April 1st, 2027. Any community that doesn't come forward to strike a deal will fall under the national agreement, she said. The work hits close to home for Golmasti, who was elected as the first female Grand Chief of the Cree Nation government in Quebec before entering federal politics. Quote, just because I'm in this position doesn't mean that I don't know the personal experience of seeing children in my own family go into care, Golmasti said. Trying to help them, trying to make those decisions for them, that's something very personal to me. Although there are 2 plans being submitted to the tribunal, Golmasti said she still wants to work with the National Children's Chief Commission and Caring Society. Quote, this discussion is not about this plan or that plan, she said. This discussion is about which path do you want to take and how can we close that gap in working together. All right. So we'll see how that develops. We're definitely going to be following this story, kids and cubs, because it is extremely important. As well, according to CBC's Brett Forrester, there's an analysis of some of 20 that says that some of the big stories involving the Indigenous community that garnered our attention this year could heat up in 2026. I'm guessing the MOU, for example, with Alberta is one of those. Of course, this deal will be another. He goes on to say here, for First Nations in at least one key area, 2025 ended the same way it started, with the Canadian government fighting Indigenous people in court, trying to limit Ottawa's legal duty to provide Indigenous cares with essential services, and losing again. On December 20th, 2024, one of Trudeau government's last acts of the year was to start a court challenge against the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, aiming to overturn a legal order requiring Canada to tackle a backlog of requests at the Jordan Principles Initiative. A year later, on December 15, 2025, the Carney government found itself on the losing end of a precedent-setting Jordan's Principle case at the Federal Court of Appeal. The decision only further entrenched Ottawa's legal obligations. I am going to take a little look at what that decision said here, because I totally missed this story. This was from December 16th from Brett Forrester. It says, the Canadian government has lost in court again to a First Nations grandmother fighting to fix extensive mold at her home on Oneida Nation of the Thames near London, Ontario. And I am going to show you this picture because this is absolutely gross and disturbing. Screen sharing is not allowed. Why is screen sharing not allowed? Allowed me to do it earlier. Are you seeing it, kids and cubs? Yeah, there we go. Let's see if we can make that a bit bigger so you can. This here is disgusting. Nobody should be living in these types of conditions. This is completely and wholly unacceptable. Oh my word. Wow. The legal battle concerns Joanne Powless's request of $200,000 through Jordan's Principle for remediation work, which Indigenous Services Canada denied despite a doctor calling the service, quote, a life-saving necessity for Powless's 2 grandchildren for whom she is the primary caregiver. In a decision released Monday, the Federal Court of Appeal says ISC's denial was unreasonable because it was neither justified, transparent, nor intelligible. Of course, it's not intelligible. Who would determine that children should live in that type of environment? That's the little 6-year-old foster kid in me that's speaking right now. Not my 52-year-old adult self. That's. Ooh, okay. Kids and cubs, I'm not the most objective on this. I will readily admit. Okay. In a decision released Monday, the Federal Court of Appeal says the ISC's denial was unreasonable because it was neither justified, transparent, nor intelligible. Worst of all, ISC failed to grapple with the potential consequences for the 2 young sisters with severe asthma made worse by mold, writes Justice K. Siobhan Monahan. Quote, Quote, the reasons for the ISC appeal decision do not demonstrate any consideration of these consequences, no discussion of health consequences or the risk of the child welfare involvement given the unsafe living conditions. Powless's lawyer, David Taylor of Conway Baxter Wilson in Ottawa, told CBC Indigenous the court has rendered a solid ruling that sends a strong message to the federal government. Quote, when the state holds incredible power over the lives of children, it has to explain how it's using that power and how the use of that power is justified, he said by phone. This is really a message to Canada that its response to Jordan's principle needs to step it up, and it needs to be one that is robust. Jordan's principle is a human rights rule that requires government to provide First Nation kids with the necessary social, health, and education services without discrimination or delay due to jurisdictional bickering over which level of government should pay for them. So in other words, pay the money now, and you guys fight it out after to determine. So if you determine the wrong level of government paid it, then you resolve that amongst yourselves later and fix the accounting. But don't hold all that money hostage until you guys can get your own crap together amongst yourselves. Because that's not right, and you don't do that to kids. That's basically what that decision says here. Wow. The rule was established by the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal in a long-standing, often bitterly fought complaint that dates back to 2007. Successive federal governments have consistently fought the complaint or court rulings connected to it, but have yet to prevail in court. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and First Nations Child and Family Caring Society, a complainant in the original human rights complaint, intervened in the Powless appeal as well. The appeal court unanimously dismissed Canada's appeal of a federal court decision rendered in July. In that prior ruling, the court also sided with Powless and harshly criticized ISC, calling the department's denial an, quote, impermissible narrowing of Jordan's principle. Who's leading that department, and why do they still have a job? Quote, I largely agree with the nature of these criticisms, wrote Monahan, but she found ISC's denial fell short for different reasons, namely that ISC failed to justify it in clear, rational terms. Powless is now entitled to a new, properly rendered decision from a senior official at ISC, but her fight may not be done. ISC could theoretically deny her again with a different and more clearly stated reasons. Taylor said, quote, that's certainly a possibility, but said the appeal court has given strong guidance that terse denial letters that don't respond to Jordan's principal applicants' positions will no longer cut it. In a statement, Indigenous Services Canada didn't say if Ottawa will try and appeal to the Supreme Court. Quote, at this time, we are in the process of reviewing the ruling from the Federal Court of Appeal. It is too early to comment on the next steps. Just do the right thing. Indigenous Services Canada is working in partnership with First Nation leadership on how the delivery of Jordan's principle can be improved, said spokesperson Eric Head. The decision represents the first time the Federal Court of Appeal has considered the legal issues surrounding Jordan's principle, making it potentially precedent-setting. It certainly is precedent-setting in terms of the expectations that the judiciary has, said Taylor. In other words, the ruling establishes that the courts will require ISC to provide robust justification when denying applications, particularly when the stakes are as high as they were in this case. There's a recognition that the stakes matter in Jordan's principles cases, he said. Whew. Okay, so getting back to the article that led us to that. While those two cases bookended, the cases, this one here that we had, and the overall one for child welfare for children. While those two cases bookended an arguably familiar situation as a long-standing legal battle continues, 2025 also saw some major shifts in the Indigenous political world. And here's a look back at those events. First, the fight over First Nations kids. The trouble at the Jordan's Principle program was constant. Amid the growing backlog of requests, Indigenous Services Canada was implementing a contentious new operational bulletin that limited the service's eligibility for funding. An official with the Cree community of Saskatchewan told me they had to pause a suicide prevention program due to changes. A family in southern Ontario called it a nightmare as their autistic son was poised to lose funding for his education. The nightmare soon became ultra real when Canada did indeed pull funding for 8-year-old Ethan Maricle's schooling. Other Jordan's Principles users fought denials in court and won, culminating in Canada's loss to First Nations grandmother Joanne Powless at a federal court of appeal in December. The battle continues, mainly over the future of the on-child reserve welfare system. And then you had Mark Carney. The newly elected Prime Minister instituted tectonic political shifts in the capital and earned some early rebukes from First Nations leaders. Amid election talk of imposing a pipeline on Indigenous nations, Indigenous leaders demanded inclusion. Some even threatened an ILO No More 2.0 protest movement should Carney forge ahead on fast-tracking projects without their consent. Cue the damage control. The government hastily organized a series of summer summits to try to ease the concerns. I spoke to a dozen of leaders and heard everything from unwavering resistance to eager support. As the year wound down, the mounting frustration was palpable. An oft-repeated complaint was that Carney only vowed to consult Indigenous leaders after rushing his major projects law through Parliament. That frustration was evident on December 2nd when the Assembly of First Nations unanimously endorsed a resolution calling for the retraction of Canada's Memorandum of Understanding with Alberta on a pipeline and energy development. Carney was there later that day in a familiar spot in a conference room packed with chiefs trying to ease their concerns. There was the Cowichan decision as well. In early August, a BC Supreme Court judge found the Cowichan tribes have Aboriginal title to between 300 and 324 hectares in the city of Richmond, where privately owned homes are built on top of a historic village site. The case spanned an incredible 11 years and more than 500 hearing days in a complex trial that was capped with the landmark ruling. In the immediate aftermath, confusion reigned. How can Aboriginal title and private property rights coexist? The question hasn't been answered in Canadian law. High-stakes appeals are pending, and this lengthy case is far from over. And you have the usual suspect conservatives, especially crusty old white men, basically saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe they're going to take away our property from us." Yeah, welcome to how it feels. You don't like it, do you? Maybe now you're starting to begin to understand what it was like. You're so close to getting it, guys. So close. Ugh. Meanwhile, a complex nine-week civil trial pitting Métis leaders against each other wrapped in March with closing arguments. The high-stakes multi-million-dollar lawsuit was filed in 2022 by Cassidy Caron, who we had as a guest on the show, then president of the Métis National Council, against her predecessors. 3 years later, at a trial, federal officials were subpoenaed to testify about whether leaders from the Manitoba Métis Federation mismanaged millions of dollars earmarked for an MNC Veterans Recognition Program. It ended in disaster for the Métis National Council and vindication for the Manitoba Federation. And there's been tensions between the Manitoba Métis Federation and the Métis National Council on recognition of who is actually Métis or not. In November, Ontario Superior Court Justice Loretta Merritt said MNC's witnesses were, quote, evasive and gave evidence that was, quote, not very helpful, not logical, and at times clearly wrong. Political disputes are best resolved at the ballot box, Merritt wrote. The court also said the Métis National Council must pay the defendants' legal bills, reportedly in the millions of dollars. Okay, interesting there. I wanted to ask, to check this, because when I saw the mention of funding being pulled for an autistic First Nations boy, I thought that that is not a good thing and deserves a little bit more attention. So I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but I'm going to find out more about this too, because this is something that happened back in July. And again, Brett Forster of CBC is reporting on this. And he says, Katie Maricle's nightmare has now come true. Her husband, Murray Maricle, is from the Tyendinaga Mohawk Territory near Belleville, Ontario, and their only child, 8-year-old Ethan Maricle, is autistic, nonverbal, and has epilepsy. He's used the Jordan's Principle Initiative to access therapy and education since 2018-19. Jordan's Principle exists to ensure First Nations youth can access essential health and social services without delay or disruption, with jurisdictional questions over which government should pay to be worked out later. But that's exactly what Katie Maricle feels is happening, a disruption due to jurisdictional squabbling. She said the family was shocked to learn on May 9 that the federal government had a timeline for their money. The deadline had passed, meaning $60,000 in funding they thought they had just expired. It's been a family in crisis mode, said Maricle, a teacher by trade who works for a local nonprofit organization, in an interview from her home in Orillia, Ontario, a small city north of Toronto. Without money for therapy, cut off from services, and nervously preparing to send their son with complex needs to public school for the first time in September, the Maricles are grappling with a life turned upside down by Indigenous Services Canada. Quote, that's his education, and his right to an education was suddenly kind of stripped from our hands, said Maricle. The family is one of among thousands caught up in sweeping changes Ottawa introduced earlier this year amid a backlog of 140,000 unprocessed Jordan's Principles requests. Oh my God. Those changes meant some services were being scaled back, while Canada would no longer guarantee a previously approved request would be approved again. Katie Maracle said the abrupt loss of services has been challenging and harmful. Quote, try to explain that to somebody who's 8 years old, non-speaking, no more teachers, no more friends, no, just stopped. At first, he thought it was great being at home with mom and dad full time. He's like, this is fantastic, but it's starting to show. And he shows his discontent, sadness, and frustration is through behavior regression. The federal government has rapped Canada's knuckles twice in rapid succession for denying Jordan's principal applications by, quote, taking an unduly narrow approach, said lawyer David Taylor. Quote, there's a whole raft of cases, I suspect, that are affected by this narrow interpretation, said Taylor, a partner at Conway Baxter Wilson in Ottawa, in an interview. Taylor has argued extensively about Jordan's principle at the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal and in court, and two of his clients recently won urgent court challenges, which he said sends a clear message that Canada needs a serious rethink of the path it's on. In the case of Joanne Paulus, Canada denied Jordan's principal application for money to fix a mold-contaminated home, arguing no such government service is available to the general public. We don't offer it to the general public, so why would we offer it to her? Really? Because of decades and decades and decades and decades and decades of underfunding that was also not available to the general public? Perhaps. In the other case, Patrick Cully sought full-time applied behavioral analyst therapy for his daughter Scarlett, who is autistic. ISC said, quote, it was not aware of an existing government service that funds such therapy. But judges called Canada's decisions untenable, unreasonable, and contrary to the orders of the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, which require Ottawa to assess each child's unique needs, not apply blanket policies. Quote, it's just kind of compounding layers of a discriminatory approach, said Taylor. And that's something that hopefully the Cully and Palace decisions are going to start trying to unwind. Katie Maracle is hopeful about the implications of the Cully case given the similarities to hers and hopeful about a new cabinet minister at ISC. Asked for a message for the Maracle family, Indigenous Services Minister Mandy Galmasti reiterated in a statement that funding for school-related requests will only be approved under certain circumstances under the new rules. Quote, we have adjusted our services to ensure that we adequately address the urgency of requests, the statement reads in part. Ethan Maracle, however, is still without a decision on his current funding request, despite it being labeled urgent, and without services he's had most of his life, transportation, intensive clinical therapy, and one-on-one educational assistance at a privately run center for neurodiverse children. Amanda Basarowicz, the founder and clinical director of IBI Behavioral Service and Unique Minds Academy in Barrie, Ontario, said she used to have 17 children funded by Jordan's principal. Now she has none. Quote, we had no idea that this new arbitrary decision was being implemented, she said, referring to the end date that saw Ethan's funding pulled. Basarowicz said the transition can create more harm, damage, and trauma for kids who lose services. However, she said she's still owed about $265,000 from Jordan's principal overall, describing the situation as financially ruinous, stressful, and unsustainable. Quote, that is debt that we absolutely will not recover unless parents are willing to pay it, she said. Again, my heart hurts because the families that thought they were approved for these services ultimately shouldn't be held responsible. And this part of that, learning this part, really pisses me off because, first of all, the services are not available in abundance, but where the services are available, if they're not actually being paid for and compensated, and that can be ruinous to the providers of those services, it just guarantees that those services are further not available. What the hell is going on at Indigenous Services Canada? Wow. It's amazing. 20 years and you keep on getting tribunal decisions that say, just do it. And then you go back to your office and you find a way to narrowly interpret in order to exclude as many people as possible, which is like directly against the spirit. Again, why hasn't somebody even been charged with contempt of tribunal or contempt of court here? My God, these things take way too damn long to resolve. Unbelievable. All right. Moving on with other subjects today. I had no idea that we were going to spend so much time on that today. But again, when you start discussing these things and then you find out the overall or general decision or general gist of what's going on, but then you get led to the individual cases that bring you to this, because it's easy to talk about in theory. Oh, well, First Nations kids under the child welfare system are not getting the same amount of money as anybody else. Oh, isn't that terrible? Yeah, that is terrible, but what does that look like in reality? How does that manifest itself in real life, in everyday life? How does this affect people? Really? Like educational services for autistic children just removed, not knowing whether or not you're going to have your same funding year after year. That situation with mold and the children living in that, children who already have asthma, and absolutely no consideration of, no, we're going to deny that. And what happens to the kids if you do that? It blows my mind. We're talking about children. This is cruelty and neglect that is a choice. This is stuff that is being done in our name, on our dime. This is not acceptable. It wasn't acceptable from day one, but it certainly isn't acceptable 20 years later that this is not resolved. My word. Okay. I'm revved up. Clearly. Oh, man. Okay. Another little bit of interesting news, kids and cubs. Yesterday, I was looking at some economic data and noticed that the Canadian dollar is trading above 73 cents and has been for most of the past week, which is absolutely good that our dollar is gaining strength and gaining strength, I guess you would put it, especially in the context in which we have a leader of the opposition that keeps on wanting to tell us how broken we are, which is a little less than impressive. But the Canadian dollar seems to be doing well, but there is also the story of the American dollar at the moment. And there really is a tale of $2 here. And when you're only looking at the Canadian dollar, in this particular instance, you're probably only getting half the story. And this is really interesting and goes against the entire narrative that PM and Poilièvre keeps on trying to impose on us. Hopefully, I will be able to draw up the US story, because it seems that it was only available for a temporary amount of time. So hopefully, I will be able to pick it up on my phone where I saw it the first time, because I can't seem to bring it up on the desktop here. So I can give you the comparison. But no, this is not a good thing. Hopefully I'll be able to do that. But here I will talk first about the Canadian dollar, and then hopefully stuff for the American dollar will be able to come to us, and I'll be able to bring you both bits of news. But for the Canadian dollar, this is according to the Financial Post, Gigi Suhanik here. And it says, the Canadian dollar spent much of the last half of 2025 unloved, but optimistic economic data and a more favorable outlook on interest rates in Canada and the United States have many analysts calling for the loonie to turn around in 2026. Quote, a recent uptick in the macro data has seen us turn slowly, aggressively more positive on the Canadian dollar, Nick Rees, Director of Macro Research at Monex Europe Limited, said in a note. Sorry, there was a pop-up that came up and was exactly on top of the sentence I was reading. Stronger than expected job creation in October and November, and third quarter gross domestic product GDP of 2.6% annualized compared with forecasts for 0.5% have economists reassessing the Canadian economy and the currency. Monix expects the Canadian dollar to start the new year around 72 cents US and end the year at 75.9 cents US. It was trading around 73 cents US on Monday afternoon. CBIC Fixed Income Currency and Commodities also expects the Canadian dollar to enter 2026 at 72.5 cents US, but exit 26 around 74 cents US. The loonie has been pushed and pulled over the past few weeks, but it's likely to sustain some positive momentum in 2026. Besides a less dire economic outlook, continued interest rate cuts by the U.S. Federal Reserve should provide more lift to the loonie over the year, economists say, especially after the Bank of Canada indicated it is comfortable with its current benchmark lending rate. A shrinking interest rate differential between the U.S. and Canadian rates has historically helped to boost the loonie, and markets are betting the Fed will cut 2 more times in 2026 after cutting 3 times this year. The Canadian economy should continue to gain support at the margin from easing at the Fed, Rees said. The Canadian dollar had a tumultuous 2025. Earlier in the year, it fell to almost a decade low of 68.8 cents US as the threat posed to the Canadian economy by US President Donald Trump's tariffs began to unfold. From there, the loonie bounded 7.2% to a high for the year of 73.7 cents US as the greenback fell out of favor, with an index that measures its value against a basket of major currencies plummeting. Investors fled the US dollar because of Trump's Liberation Day tariff plan, which he subsequently backed away from, and rising federal debt. From that June high, the loonie gave back some of those gains to trade just below 71 cents US in early November. During that period, the Bank of Canada cut rates 2 times, opening up the rate differential gap between the loonie and the US dollar, making the latter more attractive to investors. Now, the Canadian currency is clawing back, and it's up about 4.7% for the year against the US dollar. Sean Osborne, Chief Currency Strategist at the Bank of Nova Scotia's Global Economics and FX Strategy, expects the Canadian dollar to finish 2026 at 75.1 cents US. Quote, our macroeconomic forecasts, particularly regarding monetary policy, support the outlook for some strengthening in the Canadian dollar over the medium to long term, he said in a note. Though he said trade risks with the U.S. are a clear and present danger for the Canadian dollar and Mexican peso the coming year. Economist David Rosenberg recently reversed his long-held bearish outlook for the Canadian dollar and has a target of 77 cents US for 2027. That may end up proving conservative, he said in a column for the Financial Post. Rosenberg listed 10 reasons to explain his change of heart, including that the Bank of Canada appears done with rate cuts, better than expected GDP, and the improvement in Canada's productivity. Carl Shamata, Chief Market Strategist at Corpay Incorporated, is calling for the Canadian dollar to enter 2026 at nearly 73 cents US and end the year at 75.8. However, he said long-term currency forecasts have a habit of being wrong, citing in a note the example of 12-month Euro-US dollar projections that missed the mark by an average of 7 cents US from 2007 to 2025, and also got the direction wrong more than half the time. Okay. Probably not the most, reliable type of data, I guess you could say, but still really good news. Now here I'm going to see if I can find that article from the Financial Times about the dollar and bring it up for you, because yesterday I was able to do that relatively easily. Today it is being slightly capricious. And there we go. It won't come up on my desktop, but it will come on the phone. So here I have it here. This is by Ian Smith, and this is the Financial Times of London here. The US dollar is heading for its steepest annual drop since 2017. So while the Canadian dollar is up almost 5% relative to the US dollar this year, the US dollar not doing so well. So heading for its steepest annual drop since 2017, with Wall Street banks predicting further weakness next year as the Federal Reserve presses ahead with interest rate cuts. The greenback has slumped 9.5% against a basket of major currencies this year after U.S. President Donald Trump's trade war sparked fears for the world's biggest economy and cast doubt over the dollar's traditional status as a haven for investors. The euro has had the biggest gain of the major currencies against the faltering dollar, surging nearly 14% to above $1.17 level last reached in 2021. Quote, this has been one of the worst years for dollar performance in the history of free-floating exchange rates, Sarah Velos, global head of FX research at Deutsche Bank, referring to the more than half-century during which currencies' values have been set by the market rather than tied to gold. While the dollar's initial weakness was triggered by Trump's launch of aggressive tariffs against U.S.'s trading partners in April, it was at one point down 15% against major currencies before regaining some ground. The Fed's resumption of rate cuts in September has kept it under pressure. The prospect of the Fed reducing rates again next year while other central banks, including the European Central Bank, hold or even raise borrowing costs will drive the dollar lower, according to analysts and investors. Traders expect two or three quarter point cuts from the Fed by the end of 2026. By contrast, ECB chief Christine Lagarde said this month that all options should remain on the table as the central bank held rates but raised its growth and inflation forecasts. Wall Street banks expect the euro to strengthen to $1.20 by the end of 2026 and the pound to climb from its current level of 133 to 136. Quote, the Fed is bucking the trend. Ha ha, accidental pun. In terms of global central banks, it is still very much an easing to chief international economists at ING. The performance of the dollar, which is still the world's dominant currency, has repercussions for companies, investors, and central banks. Its weakness this year has been a boon for U.S. exporters, but a drag for many European companies that generate sales in the U.S. The currency's fortunes in 2026 will also be shaped by Trump's pick for Fed chair. Analysts argue with further declines likely for the dollar if Jay Powell's successor is seen as likely to bow to the White House calls for deeper rate cuts. And right now, the person that would be such a lackey is Kevin Haskett, I think, or Haskett, whatever his name is. Not particularly the most brilliant mind, too, when I see him in interview, especially when trying to defend the tariffs. I saw an interview with him where he was saying that the tariffs were working, and then the journalist asked him the question that kills, and he sat there and he was like, and he had nothing. Yeah, he was literally stuttering and stammering. So if he becomes the Fed chair, oh boy, will be the international markets. Man. So yeah, bond investors have told the U.S. Treasury they are concerned that Kevin Haskett, one of the leading candidates to succeed Powell when his term expires in May, would lower rates to please Trump, the Financial Times reported this month. Under a new chair, investors are braced for a Fed that is, quote, more interventionist, more aggressive in rate cutting, and, quote, more inclined to move on gut instinct, said ING's Nightly. A Fed shackled to the White House would reignite fears over U.S. policymaking that undermined the dollar in the weeks following Trump's Liberation Day tariff announcement in April. Mark Sobel, a former Treasury official and U.S. think tank OMFIF, said Trump's erosion of the fundamental pillars of dollar dominance may be a very slow long-term burn, but it still weighs our points. The dollar has bounced 2.5% off the low for the year it touched in September, in part because predictions that the trade war would drive the U.S. economy into recession have failed to materialize. Dollar bulls say the artificial intelligence investment boom will keep the U.S. economy growing faster than Europe's next year, limiting the Fed's room to cut rates aggressively. Kit Jukes, currency strategist at Societe Generale, said we don't that President Trump's economic policy can derail the technological revolution that is going on the west coast of America. But analysts caution that further gain for U.S. stocks next year may not buoy the greenback. While the dollar stabilized after the Liberation Day turbulence, analysts said Trump's chaotic policymaking has prompted foreign investors to start hedging their exposure to the dollar when buying U.S. stocks. The weakness in the dollar has been driven in part by a, quote, structural reassessment of unhedged dollar exposures by global investors, particularly in Europe, said Deutsche Bank's Sarvelis. Investors' use of hedging through derivatives trades exerts downward pressure on the dollar. And with both of those dynamics there, if you remember Kits and Cubs, I had mentioned to you a few weeks ago that I was trying to see if I could secure media accreditation for us with the Bank of Canada. So they have policy announcements. We can pop in by phone or in person if we can get to Ottawa and ask a few questions. And the reason I wanted to do so is because I had noticed at that time what was happening with the Canadian dollar. I had also noticed what was happening with the price of gold really shooting up this year it's incredible. Like even the TSX is doing well. We crossed a record, all-time record of 32,000 sometime last week and closed on the TSX. And I think at the end of 2025. I mean, if you look at the graph of the TSX, you can see that it has been on a tear since 2025. Hopefully, I can draw that up to you so I can show that to you how it looks. But hopefully, I'll be able to bring that up there a little bit. But the reason I wanted to ask those questions is because quite some time ago, Canada, in terms of its reserves, we got rid of all of our gold reserves and instead decided to have a basket of various currencies, in which, of course, I would assume the US dollar was one of the larger holdings. But considering the rate at which the price of gold has gone up recently, if we're looking at a chart of that, if we're looking at a 1 year number, trying to get a percentage here for us. In the last year, gold is up. Come on, work with me here. All my sources of information and more stuff falling all over the place. Why will it not bring me to the usual page it brings me to when I ask for this? This is the thing with working with a computer. That is not your own. Where it goes naturally is not where you want it to. So let's try that one more time. Over the past year, gold has gone up 66.54%. So if we still had some gold, the overall value of our reserves would be much more strong than it is without it. And given that the US dollar is dropping, so I would like to be able to ask the Governor of the Bank of Canada whether or not we are going to be changing our reserves policy to being buying some gold at some point, and what has been the shift in the percentage of American dollars that we have in our reserves versus other. So have we changed our portfolio to have much less US dollars and perhaps more euro, more British pound in our reserves, because we're seeing that the way that this is going, because right now holding dollars actually, depending on the proportion of them, would weaken our overall position in terms of reserves. So I was just wondering if the Bank of Canada had some policies with how it was managing that, because we talk about the interest rate and whatnot, but very often, very rarely in these conferences, in these press conferences, are we talking about our currency reserves, how we're shoring ourselves up. And that's a question I had in the back of my mind. On the upside, the Bank of Canada Media Department did get back to us and asked us a few questions, and so we have to get back to them. So it looks like there's a possibility that we might actually be able to get that accreditation, which would be absolutely wonderful. So we're working on that for you kids and cubs, and if we're able to get that, this would be the first time that we actually get a media accreditation second time actually, because we had the conference on homelessness to cover something. Because we don't tend to make news here, right? We tend to curate news. But, I'm a curious little beaver when, when I get an itch to scratch here in my mind, I like to scratch it. So, and nobody's going to be able to tell me what's going on there other than the people of the Bank of Canada. So I guess I have to get the accreditation to ask them, because no other journalists seem to be asking them the question. So, not that I consider myself a journalist, but maybe somebody should ask, because it seems like a rather important thing. How are our currency reserves doing in all this tumultuous? Because that's a backstop for us, right? So that's what we're working on here, to try to bring that to kids and cubs, and hopefully that will work. But yeah, so taking a look at the TSX, like I mentioned, kids and cubs here. Let's get that graphic up for you, and we can take a look. Is this the one here? Yeah, this is the one. So if you see kids and cubs, this is the TSX graph, and this is looking for the last 5 years. And we see here in 2004, or here, October 27th, 2023, the TSX was at 18,737. It closed, or right now, sorry, because it's the stock market is open, it's currently at 31,867. If we look at the beginning of this year, we opened at 25,073.54. This here is a very big jump up for our stock exchange. So when I'm telling you, kits and cubs, about the K-shaped economy and how things are different for those at the bottom of the ladder, those who rent and don't have retirement funds or pension funds that are invested in the stock market and don't have their own stock portfolio versus those who do, you can see, right? If you have some stocks or whatnot, and you look at that stock market performance, you're doing well, right? This economy is working for you. But if you don't have that stuff, we know what's happened to the price of food over the past few years, right? Even though inflation is back down close to the 2% target overall, that is not the case for food. And, all that means is that the rate at which the price of food is going up is slowing down, but it doesn't mean that all the amount by which food rose since the COVID pandemic. There's been no cut in that, right? Salaries and compensation need to catch up to what the increase in the price of food was, because the price of food is not coming down. It's just increasing at a lower rate than it was. So you absolutely need that to pay more attention to those that are on the bottom rung of the K than those that are on the top rung, because with the way that the stock market is doing, they're doing fine, right? They can cash some stuff in and have extra reserves. I mean, anybody who's invested in gold, right, saw their holdings go up by, the price of gold itself. But if you're invested in gold companies, those may have gone up even more, right? Those may have gone up over 75% over the course of the year and more. So yeah, you have to, we have to be really paying attention, really, really paying attention. And Kits and Cubs, you are sending me a whole lot of love here. I see a Kit Saucy going, you have interviewed Charles Adler and Susan Holt. I would be surprised if you didn't get it. Oh, and Devin Haru. By the way, we sent Devin Haru another invitation to see if we can get him in before he goes off to cover the Olympics, so he can come and talk to us. And yes, I will also be sending another message to the office of Susan Holt. Hopefully the same people work for her who did when she was a leader of the opposition, to see if we can get her on again and see, we've been premier for a little while, and how are things going? Maybe we can get her back. But yeah, thank you for that vote of confidence. Linda, if they'll accredit rebels, TNB, truenortheagerbeaver should be able to get it. We're still not as well known, however. It's not obvious. When we knock on the door and we say, truenortheagerbeaver, the first response is, what? Who? Do you have a podcast? Is the video stuff all you have? Do you do other things? We get a lot of these questions. They want to know the extent and the breadth and the scope of our organization and stuff. And, it's just me and Mr. Grizzly. So it's like I can use fancy words and try to make it appear that we're bigger than we are to hopefully get us in the door. But we're a small shop. We just are. But yes, the initial response is indeed very positive. So I am very hopeful, and like I said, there's no reason for which we can't include one more, especially if it's via phone, right? Yes, just don't get well known using their methods. I solemnly swear, Dan Fam, I will never, ever, ever do. I will stop doing the show before I do that. Honor and reputation matter. Honor and reputation matter. That's a road I do not want to go down at all. we're playing the long game. Slow and steady wins the race. It's harder work, it takes longer. The rewards don't come by as fast and as plentiful. But we are good with that because we want to be here for the long run. We don't just want to pop up and then flash in the pan and just expire. So don't worry about it. Oh, yes. And Patrick Brazo, of course. There we go. All right. So, yeah, some very interesting economic news in terms of the state of our dollar and compared to the United States. We are going through some very tough times. There's no doubt about it. But we are weathering this, at least macroeconomically, as about as well as anyone could have expected us to, and perhaps even surpassing expectations there. That doesn't mean, just because the hit isn't as hard as expected or we're handling it better, doesn't mean that we're not feeling it though, right? We have to keep that in mind. Yes, we're adapting. Yes, we seem to have a good plan. Yes, it seems to be working. But at any time, the universe can throw us a curveball, right? So we can't rest on our laurels. We must remain vigilant and especially nimble to be able to react quickly, but without panic. Because panic is the worst thing in these situations, to changing situations, especially if the sands under our feet starts to shift rather rapidly and dramatically. All right. The final thing I wanted to bring to you today, which we're going to dedicate a decent amount of time to, is some interviews, year-end interviews that took place with the Prime Minister and with Pierre Poilièvre. Oh, before we get into that, I wanted to present you something because somebody shared this with me yesterday, and wow, is you know how Pierre Poilievre, this seems to be something that's symbolic or a feature of this new modern conservative movement. People saying just really outrageously stupid things, like when Danielle Smith bellied up to a camera microphone and said that, Albertans have the worst standard of living in the world. That's something that's just patently untrue, and it is right on its face because it's just so dumb. But you sit in front of the camera and you actually make that claim with a serious face, like it's a real thing. Yeah. Pierre Poilievre recently appeared on one of his influencers who claim that they are not paid and they do this out of the goodness of their heart podcast. And this influencer wants us to believe that he just happened to think, hey, what if I invited Pierre? And Pierre just decided, hey, I'm going to pop on. Just like that there was no advanced planning, just very spontaneous. The leader of a political party, who also happens to be the leader of the opposition, just happened to have some free time to pop up. Hey, I just asked him, and he said yes, like with no forewarning and not going through all the press stuff and the press corps, sorry, not the press corps, but the director of communications and all that kind of stuff of the party and all those layers until you actually get a yes. That this just kind of happened organically. Hey, I'm just some guy who does this influencing on the internet, and I just took a chance and said, hey, Pierre, want to come on my show? And he did, just like that, like with almost no warning whatsoever. Trust me, with the amount of work that I do to try to get people on this show, particularly, if they have communications team and communications people vetting, with the amount of work, there is no way that I'm believing that. But Pierre went on the plebs thing. And I have to show you this not because I want to give this guy any visibility or publicity, but this is just so what the fuck that I have to show it to you. Because, again, right, the ballot question is leadership. And we've seen a series of year-end interviews with Beav Poilièvre. He's given 3, one with Ashley Caballas, one with Rosemary Barton, and one with Dawna Friesen. And all 3 of them have been god-awful for him. They've just been absolutely atrocious performances. He would have been better not to do them at all, by any objective measure. Is completely unprepared for those, and literally only had his standard robot repeat attack lines, sometimes even still talking about Justin indirectly or directly. He even released another video a couple of days ago where Greg McKecken pointed out that he had mentioned Justin or had an image of Justin 3 times in the first minute of it. Pierre, darling, he's gone. He's not coming back. He's living his best life, man. He's touring the road with Katy Perry. Front row seat at all the concerts. He's not coming back. I know you miss him, but he's not coming back. You gotta let it go, man. But here, so this is made to look that, Pierre was just happened to be not doing all that much on Christmas Eve, and he was at home, and just decided on a whim to pop in to this guy's discussion and start, um, just chat. Now, if you watch this clip, it starts in a really weird way with an AI version of Pierre sort of like walking onto a stage like it was a rock concert, and sort of like not like walking, but like sort of like jump stepping, and like he's like, it's just really weird. Again, some of these like fan fiction stuff, right? That he would be playing Live Aid or something with a crowd of 80,000 coming to watch him like this, and that he would come on stage, jumping on all hype and entertaining and whatnot. I mean, if there's any politician in our, particularly in our current reality, who is not at all entertaining, especially in a way that would rouse that big a crowd, it is this guy. So right off the bat, this whole thing is all kinds of weirdness. But I am going to present this part because Pierre says something, and it's not going to be too long, but Pierre's going to come in, he's going to say something, then you are going to have to endure an incredible amount of over the top fluffing. And when I'm saying political fluffing, I mean fluffing. Okay. Again, there's a whole team of people out there dedicated just to make sure that Pierre can stand upright. And after the fluffing, Pierre compares himself in certain ways to certain Canadians that will blow your mind. This is the type of stuff that make people loathe him. Okay? Because it is just not. It is so ridiculously over the top and nonsensical that, if you're in the cult, oh, you're buying that. Oh, yes, Pierre, he makes such sacrifices. But if you're tethered anywhere to any type of reality that's observable, this is not. You'll be sitting there going, like, how can this guy even say this? And internet is forever. Like, why would you say this? Here we go.
My friend, can you hear me all right?
Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine.
Chat, can you guys hear the guest? Okay. How's it going, Pierre? How you doing?
Great to be with you. I just wanted to quickly call in before our Christmas dinner here at the Poilièvre household and wish you a beautiful and blessed Christmas, pleb, and to Mario Zelaya and Mark Nixon and all the many other great patriotic Canadians who are celebrating the birth of Christ today.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Looking forward to a huge 2026, Pierre. I've been looking at the polling numbers recently. The media is telling us a completely different story as to what's going on. Ever since the election, they've been beating us with these psyops, trying to convince us that first of all, they made the election about Trump when our country's in complete chaos. That was already demoralizing. But ever since that election, it's been psyop after psyop trying to get you removed as leader. And all I'll say to you, Pierre, is that if you were a bad leader, they wouldn't want you to go. If you suck, they would want you to stay. And it's been ever since the election, nonstop, everything in their power trying to get rid of you. It's crazy. So I gotta say, Pierre, you're strong, man. You're a strong person. To go through that, I don't know if I could have gone through everything you've gone through in the last 12 months. And I just gotta say that you've inspired me. Your leadership has been quite inspirational, and I'm looking forward to a day where you're going to lead our country.
Thank you very much. And I compare my life to a single mother who might be trying to provide Christmas dinner tonight. Living on a minimum wage, or the trucker. You were a trucker for a while, who's out on icy roads away from his family, or a wounded veteran. Just mistreated by his government. I think those people have it tough by comparison.
Okay, and that's all you need to hear of this. Now, I'm going to point out a couple of things. Pierre Poilièvre chose to appear on a podcast that had this image right here in the corner. Some guy giving it a double deuces, and with this right here, a fuck Carney sticker in full view. So if we're talking about judiciousness and discernment, is that what you want Canada from an alleged prime minister in waiting? And now, of course, you saw all the fluffing. You're a strong leader. Oh my God, I can't believe that I would have been able to go through what it is that you went through. Oh, your leadership. And did you notice the stupidity of the logic? Right? We are being told a whole bunch of stuff and exposed to a psyops, and people are telling you're doing so terrible and whatnot. I mean, if you were doing so terrible, like, people would want you to go, wouldn't you? Like, the fact that you're still here means that you must be doing a great job, right? Because if you're doing a sucky job, people would want you to go. Never mind the fact that people are leaving his party. And if we apply that logic to about a year ago, today, right, about 7 days before Justin Trudeau decided that he was stepping down, why is it that when everybody was asking Justin Trudeau to go, that wasn't a sign that he was such a great leader? But when everybody's asking, when is Pierre leaving? Oh, well, he must be a great leader because they want him gone. Didn't Pleb here just confess that he must think that Justin Trudeau was an exceptionally good leader because, man, he sure did put in the hours to try to make sure that Justin Trudeau went. And if people working so hard to get you to go must mean that you're an excellent leader, then you see how their logic never, if you look over the long term, longitudinally, it never is consistent with what they've said before. For Pierre, people wanting him to go is a sign that he's a good leader. But for Justin Trudeau, people wanting him to go was not a sign that he was the best leader we've ever had. It's so dumb. And then, yeah, Kitsas, you know the context behind that double finger photo That's a Karima's photo she took of volunteers working for Bruce Vanjoy during the campaign. She blew it up into a large cardboard figure. Indeed. Yep. So you will notice here, because I'm just joining you before the Poilièvre family Christmas dinner, I compare myself to the single mother who's struggling, making minimum wage, says the guy who has suckled off the extremely successful for not one, but 2 entire decades, and currently lives in the most luxurious public housing that Canadian taxpayer dollars can provide. But he compares himself to the single mother who's on minimum wage, struggling to make ends meet, or to the trucker who must be driving on the icy roads, or the veterans who his government, when he was in government, really tried to screw over 3 ways from Sunday, which originated the ABC. Are you effing kidding me? These are the kinds of statements that make normal, reasonable, thinking, well-meaning people loathe this man. This is not a serious person. Wow. He actually compared himself to a single mother struggling to make ends meet when he is a multimillionaire living for free off of us, and loves living free off of us so much that when he lost his seat, forced us all to pay another $2 million so he could have a do-over, just so he could keep on living off us. And he compares himself to a straw. My brain, it hurts. This meant, again, unserious statements from an unserious man. Yeah, exactly, Kittle. Yeah, 2 decades of 6-figure salary is so relatable, and expense accounts, and going to all these events where there's food, and fundraisers where people pay $1,500 a plate for whatnot to go there, where you get to eat for free, but then you bring back McDonald's for your cabinet ministers after for your caucus after you make them work all night in the house. Poor Pierre, the struggle is real. What a stupid father-mother. Okay. All right, kids and cubs. The thing that I wanted to do before I remembered, my mind went squirrel, and I remembered I wanted to present that to you. Prime Minister of Canada gave 2 year-end reviews, one with Rosemary Barton, one with Dawna Friesen of Global TV. And there were some people that didn't like the interview with Rosemary Barton because she was interrupting a lot, especially at the beginning. But, they got their dynamic going. And then, afterwards, there was a more respectful sort of engagement. And I don't mean respectful in the sense that she was showing disrespect, but respectful in the sense giving them time to do a little bit of politics in full sentences, right? Rather than just jumping on a concept. And I think it might have been the good people from Planet D who have a good video out there comparing Rosemary Barton's interview of Pierre Poilièvre versus her interview of Mark Carney. And they weren't critical of the fact that she was asking Mark Carney tough questions. That's what she needs to do. That's her job. They were just noticing that the toughness of the questions asked to Mark Carney versus the toughness of the questions asked to Pierre Poilièvre were nowhere near at the same level. That maybe there might have been a slight little double standard there. as you know, with these interviews, as you go through them, you know, first one could be a little shakier, and then I assume if they have a good communications team, because that's what I would do, is that then we would then sit in a room and then we would look at the interview and say, okay, you stuttered here, you stammered here, your message was not delivered clearly, there was too much noise, you need to tighten that up. And then they go and they do the second year end interview, you know, and they make that better. And then if they're doing a third one, they make that one even better. Throughout his 3 interviews, Pierre was unable to become smoother and smoother throughout. His last one with Dawna Friesen, he was a little bit smoother, but it wasn't flowing. Mark Carney's, even though he did do very well with Rosemary Parton, when he got to Dawna Friesen, you could tell that he had done the work of analysis of his interview the first time, and tightened up the message, and the responses are just nice and good packages. You know, in terms of length and content and substance, without a lot of noise in it, bringing his message as clearly as possible. So he did the work. You know, if I'm looking at the series of each of their year-end interviews, Mark Carney's obviously started better in the first place because he actually had some substance to talk about, whereas Pierre, he has his slogans, and as we've been noticing in all of these interviews, he is desperate to not talk about himself or his own leadership or his own moral failings, right? Whenever that topic comes in, he just diverts and shifts back to talking about Mark Carney. He will not talk about himself. Mark Carney has no problem talking about himself and his own policies. In fact, Pierre Poilièvre's name pretty much never enters his mouth during these interviews. Can't say the same for Pierre when it comes to Mark Carney. So I wanted to present some elements of the interview with Dawna Friesen to you with Mark Carney here, because first of all, it's a bit of a masterclass in how you give a good interview with substance. But there is some dynamics going on between them that are really interesting when you look at how you present yourself and on the whole issue of framing, either framing a question or framing an answer, and how framing really matters to a quality of the interview and the quality of information you, as an interested citizen, taxpayer, and voter at home, receive from watching those interviews, right? Because from the perspective that I look at these from, right, it's always with the view to ensuring that Canadians are capable of casting the most informed vote as possible. And you know I have a personal pet peeve. Any politician who tries to get into the way of that, I find is directly working against all of ours interests as citizens to be able to make the best decisions for ourselves, right? It's like at the time during COVID when they were saying, well, look at the data and you use your judgment, make the best decision. And then they would stop providing the data. Well, on what are we supposed to make a decision then? You need to keep on supplying us with the data. If you're not going to supply us with an analysis of the data that tells us what we should think and we need to make our own decision, you should at least still keep the data coming. And they weren't doing that. And that's this type of situation, right? There are real things going on. We have a right to know what the government is doing in our name, on our time, with our dime. And when you try to evade, not answer, when you try to blame the other guy, when when we ask you about your core policy and you give us a slogan, or you just give us some buzzwords that go in it, but you don't get into anything tactical or strategic to let us know what this really looks like in real life and how this would really go down, you are directly, in my opinion, interfering with our right to be fully informed citizens. So in this instance here, kids and cubs, we have some interesting content for you in that, like I said, we have a person of substance, Mark Carney, who is able to speak to his policies, who is able to speak to his platform, who's able to account for what it is that he is doing with his time in the seat. We've seen some interviews with him. How would he put it? What's the word? I have this concept in my head, and I'm trying to find the words to bring it to you, and it's it's not coming to me. I need to ponder this thing that I was trying to say here, and come up with a better framing of it. And maybe that will happen with as we're going through this. But we're looking at someone that you are definitely going to leave the interview, whether you agree with his positions or not, whether you respect his positions, you are going to come out of this interview definitely much more formed. Oh my God. Okay. It's doing the same thing to me today as it was doing yesterday. Let me see if I can fix this here for a second. Just bear with me, kids and cubs, because I am trying to bring up the YouTube that makes it such that we do not have commercials and things interrupting us. And it's at the moment not exactly working for me. So I have to try to log in under another account, because I was logged in under the show's account, and the commercial free stuff is actually on my personal account. So I'm going to try and log in there and bring that up. And now it's asking me for a two-step verification thing. So I think it is indeed going to work. Yes, it is, kids and cubs. Okay, success. Hey, you know what? I'm getting good at this tech stuff. I'm getting good at this tech stuff. I'm just going to pat myself on the shoulder here for having figured that out relatively quickly. Why is it asking me to sign in again? I just signed in. That is very weird. Okay, there we go. Now it's here. It wasn't, and now it is. So there you go. Okay, so in this interview with Dawna Friesen here, the first part of it, you're going to see that part that I mentioned to you, kids and cubs, about what is the artifacts having shown up at the Canadian Museum of History. And then they just get right into it. And in this first response, this first segment that I'm giving, that I'm going to show you, I want you to understand and observe how framing matters. Framing of the question, framing of the answer. So the journalist is going to frame the question in a certain way, Dawna Friesen, and Mark Carney is going to push back gently, respectfully, but reframe the answer. Okay. Now, this is a question that he was asked as well by Rosemary Barton, and the elements of the answer are the same. He doesn't have one discourse there and one discourse here that is completely different. The story isn't changing. It is consistent across interviews, which is, when you're not lying, you don't have to keep track of what you said. So, that is good. But I like the answer given here as opposed to the answer given on the with Rosemary Barton, because again, it is just it's just so well presented and constructed. So here we go, kids and cubs. Let's take a look at this. And if you like good substantive interviews, discussion, sit back and enjoy this portion here, because Mark Carney does give us some good stuff, and Dawna Friesen gives an absolute excellent interview, by the way. or has prepared a really excellent interview. I have nothing but praise for her, the way that she interviewed both Pierre and the Prime Minister, top notch. This woman deserves a promotion. I'm just going to say that, right? You will notice, first of all, the opening and stating what it is that he learned about being Prime Minister, and that again, that's an answer that's consistent that he had with Rosemary Barton. It's sort of like I knew it was a 24/7 job, but just how relentless it actually is in real life. Even though I knew, it's still surprising. But in the question that followed, right? Framing, you're courting, you're luring. Luring has a connotation, right? Usually, when I hear the word luring, the first image that comes to my mind is, hey, little kid, would you like some candy? So, luring, it's like hovering, right? It's like he was hovering over the body. Hovering is usually never good as a word. And it can be completely innocuous, but often it's not when it's used. Luring usually isn't either. Has a little bit of a negative connotation. You're courting them. And Prime Minister respectfully pushing back on that frame on the situation and putting the other frame on it, which is not luring, we're not courting, we're just going about doing what we do. And there are people that find that attractive enough to be curious to come and ask us about it and approach us. And then we talk, and then they go back and they say, well, that's what it's like in the Liberal camp, and I'm painfully aware of what things are like in the Conservative camp, and then they make a decision. So again, right, framing really, really matters in an interview. It's because the choice of words that you use, right, can denote, can reveal bias, can relieve good or bad faith, right? And if you want to if the objective is to get the best possible information out of your interview guest, yes, questions that have loaded or emotional language like that may not be the best way to get that, because it adds a tinge to the conversation that may communicate to the audience that they should be viewing. If I'm talking to someone about luring someone, immediately it sends the message that as an audience I should be considering what this person would have to say with some type of suspicion, right? Whereas if you just ask the question sort of generically, there have been people that have come to your party from the other one. How did this come about? So there's no charged language there, and you let the person tell their story, right? So we have to be, when you're listening to interviews, right, like listen to the full question, right, in the choice of words and how the framing is, because that gives you some idea. And then, of course, you've got respectful pushback versus, well, I wouldn't say luring, I would say this, and as opposed to, sometimes PM and Poilièvre, when it gets a pushback, because, well, I know you don't want me to say that, or I know you don't like me saying that, but it's true, right? This where there's always this sort of antagonistic little nasty little to it. There's none of this with Mark Carney. There's just like gentle pushback. I don't think so. And then a professional reframing of what it is that has been said. Now, the next portion I want to show you of this interview has to do with trade with the United States and how this is coming along. On our show, I think it was sometime around the month of June or July, we had come to the conclusion that Donald Trump didn't really want a trade deal. That we had an initial strategy: go in, try to hammer out something really quickly because the market doesn't like uncertainty. Uncertainty doesn't like predictability. Let's see if we can negotiate something really quickly and just resolve this. That was the first objective. That would have been the best result for all. And well, Donald Trump didn't want that to happen, so it didn't. So you have everybody on the conservative side, the politicians, their online influencers, the sycophants in the media plants, and all that kind of stuff, turning around and saying, no, Mark Carney promised, Mark Carney promised, Mark Carney promised by July 21st. With completely evacuating from the occasion, Donald Trump promised 90 deals in 90 days. July 21st was chosen in function of the 90 deals in 90 days. Trump has achieved no deals in 90 days. So we have to achieve a deal with one nation, the United States. The United States wants to achieve deals with every nation on the earth. The United States hasn't managed to achieve one. What's more likely, that the problem is us and our ability to negotiate, or them? Right? Also, Donald Trump walked away from the table twice. We're still sitting at the table. So I don't know if any of you have seen that movie Secretary. It's a bit out there like as a movie, but if you've seen it, there's a scene at the end where the guy basically asks the girl, well, girl, a man having a very unconventional relationship with a certain woman, basically tells her to sit there and wait for him to come back. And at one point, he's not coming back. He's not coming back for a long time. But she believes that he absolutely, there's no way he would not betray her trust and her devotion. And she sits there and she stays and she stays and she stays and she stays. And I guess eventually, if I remember correctly, word of it gets back to him and he eventually does come back. But he wasn't going to. He really wasn't going to. And that, it sort of gives me that impression. It's like, there's someone here who's staying. Right? We remained at the table. Yeah, okay, if they want to walk off and need some time, that's fine. We're still here. We're willing to deal. We will sit here at this table and we will wait for you to come back and we can pick up where we left off. So at that point, we had stated that our best strategy now is probably to wait Trump out. So this question has something to do with that strategy, basically boldly asking point blank, whether that is the strategy. So again, the frame, right? Are we waiting them out? Again, the Prime Minister here gives a gentle pushback on that frame segment. You will notice that there's a dance now happening right on the framing. So, it's are we waiting him out? And it says, well, it's not so much waiting it out as just not rushing to sign a bad deal, which we all know Pierre would have. So again, that delicate framing, and in that answer as well, you see the Prime Minister not only pushing back on the delicate framing, but also validating other types of framing, right? When he mentions here, you prompted me on the defense thing like this, and that was, that was an astute observation and whatnot. So the Prime Minister offers positive reinforcement like this when there's good framing. Now, of course, we must take a step back, and it's good framing according to the Prime Minister for his goals in terms of communicating his message, right? As well, sometimes you need the word there that might be a little loaded or something because the situation requires it. Like if Pierre Poilièvre is resisting talking about his leadership, you turn around and says, but you lost, right? Like when Vashi Kapelos said that, but you lost. Like this. Then yeah, that's a bit more loaded. but it's in the context of, I'm trying to get you to talk about you, and you're refusing to do that. I'm trying to get you to acknowledge your reality, and you're pretending it didn't happen. So I'm just going to put it in your face, but you lost, right? So it's not that a more aggressive pushback is not welcome or necessary. It's just it needs to be judiciously used. But here the Prime Minister is given positive reinforcement to good framing, this, and he is doing very, very gentle pushback and reframing of answers here that that may not lead him down the path that he would like to go on in terms of explaining his motives here. And then, of course, we hear in the second part of that answer the importance of Canada as a middle power and all the ways that we are helping and that we are participating in global dynamics in order to try to make the world a little bit of a better place, and for Canada to sort of step up and take a larger position, a more important position of leadership around the world. He didn't talk about this in the answer, but there's not only the Ukraine issue, but there's the whole issue of critical minerals and refining and whatnot, given that China is by far the global dominant instance in that field. And now there's a whole bunch of nations sort of coming together to try to create a parallel system for rules-based order nations in which Canada, given the size of the country and all of the deposits that we have, would be playing a leadership role in being that hub that would be an alternative to China in that field. So there's lots of ways that we're leading. There's also mentioned in that and not mentioned in that the manner in which Canada is trying to bring the CPTPP and the CETA blocks together to try to create a larger block of nations, particularly if we're going to be going into a multipolar world where people and nations actually want a rules-based order and all agree to adhere to it in a world where these big multipolar instances are trying to unilaterally change the rules of the games in order to favor them, and using their heft and their might to try and bring that into being. And we need to then, as smaller nations and middle powers, need to lock arms together, because there's safety in numbers if we can act in a coordinated manner. The Prime Minister is asked afterwards about stuff with regard to the environment, and asked pretty much point blank by Dawna Friesen whether or not he's a hypocrite, basically, given all the things that he said in the past and some of the positions that he's taking now. Some people see some inconsistencies. And in this response, it's one of the clearest. The Prime Minister still needs to do some work on it. It's still not where it needs to be, but it's one of the clearest answers that he's giving with regard to his overall sort of environmental philosophy. So let's take a look at that here. To get a little bit more of the sense of what he's doing here is he wants, we can have regulations and whatnot, or we can actually do the things that actually reduce carbon. And he wants to focus on those things, not only because there's a moral imperative, even though that is the case, but there is a clear economic benefit. And given that the United States, as he mentions, is vacating the entire public square here, there is an opportunity for us to move in and take advantage of this opportunity to gain, as he mentions, leapfrog over the United States. I'm going to leave this interview only for a little second to present something else to you on this, because he's talking about the United States. And this is something that I stumbled upon yesterday, which again is Belle of the Ranch, and you will be seeing her a little later in the show as we do the Easter egg that I wanted to bring you yesterday. But she here is I think that you are going to like this because um, basically, this is a video that has a lot of information about public opinion polling in the United States that shows that even though Donald Trump is trying to drag the nation in a certain direction, like the nation is not with him. And that includes even conservative Republican voters as opposed to moderate Republican voters. I don't know if you had received this information. It was new information to me that was extremely compelling. And so, for those of you who might be wondering, particularly from the United States side, it seems that whatever it is that Donald Trump is saying, people are not buying. And this could be positive overall for the environment, but it could also be positive for us because it seems that we indeed do have some partners out there, and that the American people isn't perhaps as far gone as we had perhaps feared.
Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Belle again. So today, we're going to talk Trump losing the environmental fight. Trump has pushed back hard against even modest climate. He's used every rhetorical trick in the book, and he's engaged in a series of high-profile moves that undermine the fight against climate. He's tried to push his dated beliefs while he's pushing dated, dirty, obsolete, more expensive energy sources. It hasn't worked. A new report from Yale says that even a majority of Republicans are opposed to many of Trump's positions. The number that the GOP will probably pay attention to the most is the percentage of people who believe climate change is increasing prices. 65% of those surveyed believe climate change is contributing to rising costs, at least a little bit. That number included 88% of liberal Democrats and 42% of conservative Republicans. 58% of liberal or moderate Republicans feel the same way as well. So about half of the Republicans think climate change is causing prices to go up. If climate change is raising prices and Trump is making climate change worse, seems like this is yet another way Trump is raising the prices the average American has to deal with. Beyond that, an overwhelming majority of registered voters, about 66%, support transitioning the entire U.S. economy to include electricity generation and transportation away from fossil fuels and to clean energy. 57% of moderate Republicans support transitioning. 73% of moderate Republicans want to fund more research into renewables. But here's another big one. As Trump runs around pulling the plug on wind projects and doing everything he can to hamper renewables, 51% of conservative Republicans support solar and wind on public land. I'm going to say that part again. A majority of conservative Republicans support wind and solar on public lands. Moderate Republicans are at 75%. Democrats are obviously even higher. Here's a surprising one. When it comes to, quote, strengthening enforcement of industrial pollution limits in low-income communities and communities of color that are disproportionately impacted by air and water pollution, even 61% of conservative Republicans support it. All other demographics were substantially higher. When it comes to eliminating FEMA, stopping publication of climate change information, stopping research on climate change, or prohibiting construction of new offshore wind farms, there is not a single majority of any demographic, even conservative Republicans, who support Trump's position. There are two big takeaways from this. The first is that Trump's position on these topics are so wrong, even his base, which is normally pretty obedient to his whims, know he's got it wrong. The second is that the public supports totally transitioning away from fossil fuels with a substantial majority. Even in this polarized political climate, Americans know the future of the country and the world depends on getting rid of the outdated, more expensive energy sources and the emissions that go along with them. We do get some good news every once in a while. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.
I am seeing in the chat lots of love for Belle. She is fantastic and fabulous. I wish I could meet her one day. I love her points, how she delivers it, how she reasons, how she presents logic. And it's always very, very clear. I wish I had that clarity, to be totally honest. But yeah, so some good news there. Getting back to the interview with the Prime Minister, Dawna Friesen asks him about the pipeline and whatnot, and the Prime Minister, I'll invite you to watch that part yourself, because it's a good interview, talks about being a believer in cooperative federalism and makes it very clear what his process is. He's talking about the order of things, that there was no point going to the Indigenous community to discuss a pipeline if there wasn't even anything agreed upon between Canada and Alberta that could create the possibility for a pipeline, right? There's no point to go and consult on something that's not possible. So now we have the conditions that are in place for something to be possible. Then you can build upon that. I still think that even though that is a very corporate and logical way to think of things, that in this particular instance, thinking that this special dynamic and the constitutional relationship with the Crown or whatnot, it probably is just better to have them involved at the opening stages. When he's doing stuff like he mentioned there, like this, there's not negotiations, but there's negotiations about negotiations, right? That's the same thing, right? The MOU wasn't a plan to build the pipeline. There is still no plan. It's a plan on what a plan to build it, what the conditions to actually have a plan to build a pipeline would be. It's the preparatory groundwork that needs to be done before you actually get to the part of doing the work. And I still believe that the Indigenous community should probably be included at that phase. But he explains his logic, and yes, in terms of a corporate boardroom and all that kind of stuff, it does make sense. But I think that it is lacking the element, the fully constitutional element in the reality here. That the obligation is different, and when you start with the position of nothing about us without us, it's just best to bring people in right on the ground floor there. And then he mentions as well, the need for the diversification. So she presses him and says, if this pipeline doesn't go ahead, is there other stuff, like would it be Keystone? And it's sort of like, well, yes, I mean Keystone could be there, but we have to be clear on this, that if the goal is to diversify our exports of yours and get more to the United States, we are not getting that benefit of advantage. And so, yeah, it gets stuff to water, but it's not the water to which we want stuff to get in order to maximize the benefit for us. So we might take it if there's nothing else on the table in order to do it, but it's probably not. It's really not what we want here. And then mentions as well, goes into talking about nation building and makes the point here of saying, listen, he doesn't want to force things on people. And fortunately, he has the luxury that there are so many people that want so many different projects that if this one is not possible now, there's no problem with it. Just putting it by the side and saying, okay, it's not possible now. Let's work on the things that are possible, because we have many more opportunities than for which we have time at the moment. So if this one's going to work, not going to work, it's no problem. There's something else that we can work on. So, just it's a good framing, because a lot of people are presenting this pipeline MOU thing as like, if we don't get a pipeline, everything is ruined and everything will be okay and nothing will be all right. And this prime minister's more like, calm down, we're trying to get a pipeline. It's probably a good idea that we get one economically, because there's lots of stuff but if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. It's not like we don't have any other options and any other things that we can't work on that will also be income generating. So the prime minister doesn't seem to be panicked about whether or not it happens or not. Because, he's trying to create, like I said, pragmatically, and in terms of believer cooperative or federalism, okay, how do we cooperate federally in order to get one if we absolutely decide that we want one and we need one, but it's not unlike Pierre, when he sits in an interview with Dawna Friesen and gives his version of it, it's sort of like, well, she says, what about duty to consult? Well, I would consult. But then he turns around and basically says, well, the decision constitutionally is entirely within the realm of the Prime Minister, and I'm going to build that pipeline. He has no project, he has no plan, he has no no mitigation factors, there's no path, route for the project, there's nobody proposing to build one, and there's nobody proposing commitments to actually fill a pipeline, but he is convinced that whatever it is, I'm going to approve it, I'll approve that pipeline. And it's my decision. So he's basically saying that the duty to consult for him is a box that he's going to tick, because no matter what it is that they're going to say, he's just going to do it anyway. Whereas the Prime Minister definitely is not, maybe ultimately that is what will happen, but he's not presenting it in that way. He's leaving room for there to learn something from the consultation, make some adjustments if needed, whereas Pierre does not seem to be. It's like, we're getting a pipeline, hell or high water, and if I have to crawl over your territory and encroach upon it to do it, well, constitutionally I have the right, so I'm going to. And that's where his thinking ends. Right. And then to end the interview, she asks the Prime Minister about affordability, which I might present to you in another episode, because we're getting a little long here. But if you're a fan of Klaus Kellerman POV, he has a video out recently where he compares Prime Minister Mark Carney's response on the issue of affordability to Pierre's. And the Prime Minister, is asked about that, and gives an answer, he's talking to Dawna Friesen, that lasts about 3 minutes, full of detail and whatnot. Whereas Pierre is asked about something on affordability and how he's going to handle it, and his answer is maximum 22 to 23 seconds before he starts talking about immigration and a whole bunch of other stuff. So, he uses a couple of buzzwords and says, my strategy is affordability, which is a slogan. And then he can explain, allegedly, his entire strategy to us in 20 seconds. Again, just absolute nonsense. And again, when you put both answers together, right, all you need to do is put the answers both together and look at them side by side. So I do encourage you to watch that Klaus Kellerman video. The juxtaposition is stark. You can really see in that instance, again, who is a serious candidate, who's given this some thought, who actually has a plan, and someone who just doesn't, who just rolls in and just decides, we need to work on affordability, so we will cut taxes, and we will boost your paychecks, and you'll see that'll happen. Yeah, but how will you do that? What strategies? What tactics? How do you get from A to B? And there's never any discussion on that. Whereas the Prime Minister, well, he proactively offers it. So again, the juxtaposition is really stark, and I will include the link to the Klaus Kellerman here video, and you can check it out for yourself. Look at the substance of the Prime Minister's answer on that versus Pierre Poilièvre's, and make a decision for yourself about who's a more credible candidate, who would be the person who you would trust to bring this to fruition. Somebody who's going to give you a couple of buzzwords and wing it, or somebody who's actually thought about it, can show that he talks about it, that he's thought about it, can talk about it in detail, and can give you some of the strategic and tactical elements of his plan on how it is that he would get from point A to point B. It is very compelling. All right, kids and cubs, that is the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. We hope that you love listening to us, because we love making this for you. Remember, sharing is caring. Word of mouth is priceless. Tell your peeps and poops all about us, especially if you share why it is our content has resonated with you. That means the world to us. If you are on the go and sometimes don't have time to listen to the show in video format, thanks to the Ray Girl, we have a pod page. That is podpage.com/thetruenortheagerbeaver with a hyphen between each one of those words, or you can scan that QR code. And when we have something fresh off the podcast bandwidth, hopefully we will be able to get that resolved soon. Then you can pop us in your ears and take us with you, so you can take on the day and remain informed at the same time. Now, kids and cubs, if you would like to help us, well, we would definitely love your help, and you can do that two ways. One of the ways is to travel to the True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated YouTube page and play with our buttons like share and subscribe, and also go to our posts section and look at our poll questions for our year-in review episode that we are planning. We would love to get your opinion. We've got a couple of questions for you to answer. I was looking at the responses yesterday. They're really interesting, but there's one poll question for some reason that only has one response, whereas everybody else, every other one of them has a lot of responses. So I don't know if it got missed or skipped. But if you have answered, if you can go back and check again that one, because I would like more than one answer. It's like 100% of you said, because there's only one of you answering. I'd like to have a little more data behind it. Of course, all of this is unscientific, of course, but it's. I'd like to know what you think about these issues. So I would appreciate that. All right. Another way you can help us, kids and cubs, is by helping us with the costs that we incur to bring this show to you. We are all for enthusiastic expressions of encouragement for myself, Mr. Beaver, and Mr. Grizzly, to keep on doing what we're doing and to keep on producing some content for you that you like and that you find informative. And if you are able, if you have the means and the will and the inclination, and you think that the product that we are presenting to you is worthy of it, we would be very much grateful to receive some financial support on your part in the form of a donation to the Eager Beaver Lodge's Emergency Hydration Fund, where you can do your bit to fight the scourge that is dry beaver. Because a dry beaver is a very unhappy beaver, and I don't want to end 2025 or start 2026 unhappy, and I'm sure you wouldn't like that either. So if you're able to give us a little bit of happy, hey, we would definitely welcome it. And of course, you will gain our undying gratitude, which definitely is worth a lot these days. It really is. So, kids and cubs, if you can go to our coffee page, ko-fi.com/eagerbeaver, all in one word, or you can scan that QR code that just appeared, we would definitely be very grateful to receive your gifts and your encouragement. And kids and cubs, if you are doing the Buy Canadian thing, just putting out a glass of water, then truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com is our email address, and you can send us a direct transfer, Canadian Bank to Canadian Bank. No CUSCE Techro gets a share of your money. In fact, that comes to us, which means your Beaver buck goes further. We also have memberships on our YouTube channel and Super Chat if you're able to donate that way. Every contribution is very much appreciated. Now, kids and cubs, if you would like to contribute in other ways, because it doesn't have to be financial, truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com. That email address is the same one you can use to write to us to let us know what you think about the show or to make some guest suggestions. We love to hear from you, or just share some stuff that's going on in your life. Because we're a community. Let us know what's going on. So we are always happy to hear from you, either there or via our socials at True Beaver, at the Blue Sky Beaver Lodge, or on the shitter. Sorry, a little congestion here. Also, True North Eager Beaver on Facebook, which is our original home, right here in the comments section. We have an Instagram that is run by Kit Uncover, and we also have the Dan Fam Discord where you can keep the conversation going. So all of these ways that you have with communicating with us and with each other, we definitely encourage to use on the major socials. We do read everything, even though we're not able to respond to everyone. And we thank you, because when you tell us what you like about the show, what you would like us to improve, or when you have guest suggestions, that's all stuff that we use to go back into the show to make it better. And we appreciate all of your support in that front. On that front, because democracy is something that you, kids and cubs, remember House of Commons petition E6821 in order to encourage our House of Commons to table some legislation that would make it such that Canadian media be owned and operated by Canadians for the best interests of Canadians. So please sign that and circulate widely. Talk to your friends about it. Get their signatures. The more signatures, the better. Kids and cubs, words of wisdom. I'm going to say the same words of wisdom I said earlier. If you're in some place that is really cold, of course, please do what you need to do to stay warm. If the roads are difficult, please do not be on the roads. And if you are going to some celebrations or hosting some, don't drink and drive. And also, if you are hosting, to ensure that your guests, when they leave, have a safe way to get home. We want the end of 2025 and the beginning of 2026 to be joyous and memorable for the right reasons. So please ensure you do what you need to do to arrive alive. And then, once that is taken care of, go out and have a blast. All right? You deserve a good time. Okay. I've said it. Your queen has decreed. You all deserve a good time, so go out and have one. Get some cubs. Could be a tough road out there, so please be kind to and gentle with yourself. And now, for the last time this year, perhaps, who knows, can you please say, Mr. Beaver, please cue the cock. 1, 2, and 3. Let me have it. Oh, now that's a way to ring out 2020.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music.
All right, kids and cubs. As promised, this is something that I wanted to bring to you yesterday and was not able to. And hopefully this will work today. It is Belle of the Ranch again, but she is talking to us about, if I've picked the right one, because I could be wrong, Charles Dickens' The Christmas Carol, and what its actual meaning might be, and a lot of stuff that people have missed. So I will say to you right now, amour et bisous. We will see you tomorrow to ring in 2026 together, and please enjoy this take on A Christmas Carol.
Internet people, it's Belle again. So today, we're going to talk about Trump's war on Christmas. Recently lobbied for a Nobel Peace Prize for, at least until he received the esteemed FIFA Peace Prize, has started another round of operations in at least 2 more countries during the period around Christmas. Trump took to social media on Christmas night to announce it in true Trump fashion. The media ran with his statement as fact. Reminder, Trump is flexible with accuracy and isn't really a solid source. Trump's version of events was pretty simple. Quote, tonight at my direction as Commander-in-Chief, the United States launched a powerful deadly strike. It goes on in typical Trump fashion from there, with all of the extreme adjectives you would expect. Is that the U.S. struck at IS targets in Nigeria. It's worth noting that while Trump has blamed the Nigerian government recently, and his social media post made no mention of the government there, probably to bolster his tough guy persona domestically. U.S. Africa command statement varied from Trump's in a pretty big detail. The initial statement reportedly said, quote, AFRICOM conducted a strike at the request of Nigerian authorities. However, that statement appears to now be deleted. Whether it was deleted because it was inaccurate or because it undermined Trump's domestic posturing is up for debate. My gut tells me that it wasn't AFRICOM that got it wrong, but I guess it's possible. Later statements indicate coordination with the local government, but not a request. There are already questions about Trump's ability to authorize these strikes. But once it's all charted, given the targeted group, there is unlikely to be too much pushback. Now, the part of this that isn't getting much coverage, probably because it doesn't fit with Trump's narrative, is that recently the U.S. has been repeatedly hitting the same group and affiliates in Somalia as well. It appears that Trump is trying to use the pretext of protecting Christians in Nigeria as a way of laundering continued strikes against a group he once claimed he defeated. This is also connected through the same group to the strikes in Syria recently. As Trump fumbles the U.S. in what appears to be multiple counterinsurgency campaigns in multiple countries, it's important to remember that airstrikes alone do not work in these campaigns. Neither does measuring the land occupied by non-state opposition forces. If Trump continues to push the U.S. towards war, he will either have to coordinate closely with host nations or put troops on the ground and commit the U.S. to what would likely be a years-long campaign the American public is unlikely to support. This whole situation is probably well outside Trump's area of expertise. It's important to remember that less than a year ago, Trump was planning to dismantle the command he now has engaging in campaigns in multiple countries. In other news, on a different potential war from the President of Peace, multiple KC-135 refueling planes flew south toward the Venezuela area of operation, along with an AWACS. For the uninitiated, these are air assets you would need if you planned on an air campaign. It's not a good sign for de-escalation with Venezuela. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.
As you may have guessed, kids and cubs, that was the wrong video. So I'm so sorry. I decided not to interrupt it because it was still a good point. But yes, it wasn't the message about the Christmas Carol. So I'm going to have to reserve that for you for another show, kids and cubs. I will try again another day, take 3. I unfortunately forgot to set it up before I rolled the credits. And while the credits were rolling, I was looking for it, and I just saw Trump on Christmas, and I thought maybe that was it, and clearly it was not. So I apologize. That error is all mine. I'm going to let you go though for now because this is good. This show has been gone on long enough here. And Happy New Year's Eve to everyone. And I promise you, I will bring you the Charles Dickens one soon. It's like, yeah. Once again, I didn't manage to stick the dismount. Oh well, there's always tomorrow. There's always tomorrow. Amour et bisous. And we'll see you soon. Bye, kids and cubs. And Happy New Year's Eve.